throw this over my shoulder. Remember my posture from my He is. Yeah, he's, you know what he is? He's a 6 foot tall, I mean, my husband and I are both small people, 6 foot tall, athletic, blonde. Yeah, I'm like, you know, you have to work hard.
Joining us here on KGW Plus, I'm Stephanie Domurat. We're bringing you a special report on the Ninth Circuit Court, which just wrapped up a hearing about an hour ago over the potential National Guard deployment in Portland. A 3-judge panel heard from both the state of Oregon and the Trump administration, each having about 20 minutes to make their case. That did not include time from judges' questions. And there were a lot of questions and a lot of back and forth. Now, joining us now is KGW's Iboshi, who's been following this hearing and every step of the way, really, over the last couple of weeks. He's here to break down what happened. We also have Laura Appleman joining us to give us legal perspective. She is the Van Winkle's Melton Professor of Law at Willamette University. Thank you both for being here. Kyle, I want to start with you. Let's just get up to speed on where things stand right now.
Yeah, so just to set this up a little bit, last weekend, Judge Immerget here in Portland issued a temporary restraining order for 14 days, temporarily blocking the National Guard from being deployed in Portland. The state of Oregon had challenged that deployment, saying it is unlawful and unnecessary. The federal government said, hold on, let's appeal, which is exactly what happened today. They went before this 3-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The hearing lasted for about an hour. It was what they call a hot bench. The judges were asking a lot of questions right out of the gate. They questioned both the attorneys representing the federal government, the Trump administration, and also the state of Oregon. And ultimately, we'll make a decision, but when that decision comes, we just don't know.
Okay, could it be any day, any hour? Laura, do you know at this point?
I think it could be any day, any hour. What they said, the judges, when finishing up, is they seemed to indicate that it would be soon. Obviously, there's a great interest in having this before the TRO dissolves. There is another hearing scheduled right before the TRO dissolves, but before the district court judge would have to extend the TRO. But I think everyone would like a decision sooner.
Yes, everyone is watching. Well, let's. I want to know, Laura, today, either side of the hearing, what did either side need to prove in court today to have this appeal happen or not happen?
Right. So really, 2 focuses on what the hearing was on. And both of them were on the statute that discusses when the president can federalize the National Guard. So there's prongs 2 and 3, very briefly. Prong 2 says the president can federalize the National Guard when there's a rebellion, and prong 3 says when it's needed to assist, in the safety and, protecting the well-being of any part of the city or country. And so rebellion was actually quite a bit of discussion. Very briefly, the government attorney argued that the meaning of rebellion, as in the statute, really should be traced back to 1792 and sort of the understanding there. And the reason that was discussed was because when we're talking about rebellion, do we mean rebellion of the entire country or part of the country, like with Fort Sumter in the Civil War, or are we talking about a more localized rebellion, such as the Whiskey Rebellion?
So what's interesting is that, of course, we had the federal district judge, Judge Immerget, last Friday do this, grant the hearing to the temporary restraining order blocking Trump's troops. Right. And today it felt really different. Yes. I didn't listen to the whole hearing, but Kyle, first let's start with you. How did today's hearing feel different from last week?
So as someone who listened in on Friday's hearing, and we should note no cameras were allowed in district court on Friday. In federal court, we're not allowed to. Today, luckily, it was a live stream, so we were able to watch and listen in, which I thought was really valuable. Friday's hearing, Judge Immerget, same thing, started peppering both attorneys right out of the gate. The questions were fairly critical of the federal government, and so you kind of felt like she was headed in the direction of granting this temporary restraining order, although we didn't know, right? Ultimately, she did. Today's hearing was interesting in that Judge Graber started asking the initial questions of the federal government, and you didn't really know where things were going, but I felt like the script really shifted when the state of Oregon was making its presentation, because Judge Nelson and Bade were very critical of the state, or at least very pointed in their questions. And to me, that as an observer and with no legal training or background, but just as an observer, it definitely seemed like they were really critical of the state of Oregon's position.
Can I just ask one
and so we'll see where that goes, but it definitely, it felt like it was, and I won't say more favorable, but it's headed in the direction potentially of potentially dissolving that TRO. But again, we'll have to wait and see.
Laura, can you tell us more about these 3 judges and what happens at the Ninth Circuit level?
Sure. So Judge Graber, I believe she's taken senior status. She is a longtime Oregonian. Before she was appointed to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, she was on both the Oregon Court of Appeals and Oregon State Supreme Court. Judge Nelson and Judge Bade were both appointed by President Trump. They're a little newer. I don't believe either of them are actually in California. But of course, the Ninth Circuit is an enormous, enormous circuit, so it spans lots and lots of states.
And they're just randomly assigned these cases?
Correct, randomly assigned.
Yeah, so in this case, did it feel like there was 2 against 1 kind of going one way or another, or what was your take?
So I'm always reluctant to read the tea leaves. However, in my personal opinion, I would say, although Judge Graber certainly came out hot, asking questions of the government attorney, I do think that Judge Nelson and Judge Bade really gave the state attorney a run for their money. Not that, I think both attorneys were excellent, but I think it did sort of seem that the facts were better for the government attorney than the state attorney.
Big picture right now, so this hearing today and what the Ninth Circuit judges are deciding is whether or not to appeal the TRO, the second TRO, correct? Or the first TRO from last weekend?
The first TRO. So
okay.
Very briefly, the government did not appeal the second TRO because they felt it's the same. So this is whether there should be, the TRO should be dissolved.
So if one TRO is dissolved, does that mean essentially both will be?
Yeah, both will be.
So there was no need for the government in this case to appeal that second TRO.
That's correct.
Kyle, back us up a little bit here and give us a reminder of how we got here exactly.
So there have been ongoing protests outside the ICE facility for several months now. A lot of the activity really was at the beginning of the summer, and that was part of the state's argument here is really the real violent protest or conflicts with federal agents came at the beginning of the summer. Since then, things have kind of cooled off a little bit. This kind of is an interesting point of debate that came up during today's hearing is does it matter when things really are troublesome?
Right.
Does it matter that the real problems happened earlier in the summer versus what's happening now? And Laura, maybe you want to touch on that as far as the timing of all that, because I think that was a point of contention here, right?
So yeah, and this is sort of prong three, which we mentioned earlier, time framing. So when the Oregon National Guard is federalized, do you have to look, does it have to be for facts that happened just right before that? So in the month of September, for September 27th, Secretary Hegseth's order, or can you look all the way back to June? Because remember, they closed the Portland ICE facility for almost a month due to protests and violence. And so the government attorney was saying that the district court was too narrow with the time framing, and the state attorney was saying, no, it has to be relatively right before that.
It was also interesting because I know a lot in the hearing last weekend with Immergit, and there was a lot of question about really what was happening on the ground. It almost felt like in this situation, it wasn't as much about what was happening day to day on the ground as much as where does the power lie, right, of calling for help and what the definition is of a rebellion.
Right. I think that's true. I do think, though, they did get into a discussion of the facts. Now, the facts were not being challenged by the government attorney, but that what those facts meant. And so they're saying, the state attorney is saying, no, these protests were relatively quiet, 30 and under, and got some real pushback from Nelson and Bade saying, no, actually they were much bigger, especially if you looked before September. And so I think when the panel decides whether they're going to dissolve the TRO or not, some of this is how long of a time are we looking at?
Just if I can add one thing that I thought was interesting is Judge Nelson pointed out the facts that we know them are based on what we see on the outside, that being the protest, the conflict between demonstrators and federal agents. We don't know what's going on the inside as far as their ability to do their jobs.
Right. That's right. And one of the arguments that the government attorney made is that only really, if we're looking at sort of a rebellion with not just Portland, but also Los Angeles and other cities, we outside observers, including the Ninth Circuit, don't know what's going on, say, at the Department of War. Only the president knows that. And so this goes back to your point of, well, when can the president federalize the National Guard? And that's going to be the argument at a different Ninth Circuit argument, not the specific one we had today.
So the one today, based on where they rule and how they rule, could it set precedent elsewhere?
No,
Okay.
no. This is just what we call an interlocutory appeal. It's just about should this 14-day TRO, temporary restraining order, go. Now, there'll be a different argument on sort of the broader aspects of when the president can order this. That will have more binding precedent on the Ninth Circuit. It won't bind the rest of the country, but will be taken into account. So I think everyone is looking at both today and then this future Ninth Circuit hearing.
What can happen and what do you expect will happen if they rule in the Trump administration's favor?
I think that right now, if you remember, a couple of days ago, we had a stay on the TRO, which means that the National Guard is federalized but not sent to the Portland ICE facility. So let's say the TRO is dissolved, so we'll have the National Guard sent there. And then I think they'll stay there until this issue goes up to the Ninth Circuit, sort of under the broader aspects of when the president can send it. Now, sorry.
No, go
And
please.
just to expand on that from a logistics standpoint, the governor has confirmed that the National Guard is basically sitting around and waiting.
Right.
At this point. There are troops at Camp Withacombe in Happy Valley, likely from the California National Guard, which was deployed here over the weekend, basically brought here and then just told, hold on. And then also Camp Rylea out in Warrenton along the Oregon coast, where the Oregon National Guard was sent for training in advance, working on things like crowd control, use of force, and that type of thing. So as we understand, based on what the governor's told us, those troops are essentially on standby at those two different locations.
And if these judges rule in favor of the state of Oregon and the city of Portland, what do you expect would happen then? What would the next options be?
Well, it's only for 14 days, so they're going to have to go back. The state of Oregon's going to have to go back to the district court and say, hey, can you extend that for another 14 days? And then presumably keep on doing that until the larger issue is resolved.
Kyle, you've been following this closely every day. You've been out at the ICE facility, which is, of course, the center of this. Were you at all surprised at how today's hearing went?
No, I will get back to the opportunity to observe today's hearing, because I think it really is valuable for the general public to see how this all plays out. Like I mentioned, Friday's hearing, the public was not allowed to see because there were no cameras allowed. You could go down there in attendance, but it was a packed house. They even had overflow courtroom. Then Sunday night, a rare hearing by telephone and a ruling from the bench, which is quite unusual, but there was some urgency here. And then today's hearing, which was live streamed and people were able to see. And so I think there really is value in the public getting an understanding of how the process works and some transparency there.
Did anything stand out to you today that you feel like is worth, sharing for those who didn't see this?
I just think the questioning from the judges was really interesting. And it's posted on YouTube. That kind of speaks to the world we're in today. And you can maybe touch on this, having some experience in the Ninth Circuit, but we're in a world where we're used to everything being spoon-fed through our phone or on our laptop. The courts don't always work that way, but in this case, they do, and that's an unusual change, right?
I really commend the Ninth Circuit. So I clerked on the Ninth Circuit for Judge A. Wallace Tashima in Pasadena, 1998 to 99, the last millennium. And back then, there was very little technology. There wasn't internet, but not much of it. And so to have this now where everyone can watch, and I think this is something that a lot of people in Portland are deeply interested in. I will say even the Supreme Court now, they don't allow cameras, but they do allow, at least the audio things. I think that's really important for sort of keeping open courtroom in these, shall we say, tumultuous time. So I'm thrilled that the Ninth Circuit, I'm not surprised because the Ninth Circuit has always been, I think, on the cutting edge of technology.
Interesting. What stood out to you today that you feel like is worth sharing with viewers?
One thing at the end of the hearing that I thought it was a little hard for the state attorney to answer because there's no good answer. Don't remember if it was Judge Nelson or Judge Bade who said, we had to, the ICE facility had to shut down for almost a month, and they had to board up the windows. And then at the end, they said, well, they boarded up the windows, and City of Portland's response was to file a zoning violation to unboard them. What's what we call, when I was used to be a public defender, a bad fact. So that really, I think the other thing that really stuck out at me is that this was everyone was very, very well prepared, and the level of argument for basically, whether you're going to put a stay or dissolve on a TRO was really impressive, so these are complicated issues on a statute that I think most lawyers are not, don't understand a lot about, and so I'm just impressed with everyone and their level of knowledge.
Very, very detailed, yeah.
And that question from Judge Nelson was kind of the last question.
It was.
So it's one of those you walk away because there was there was an answer, but I don't know if it was satisfying necessarily.
Oh, there was an answer. It's just, and again, no fault of the state attorney. This is just the facts.
Well, and when you say bad fact, can you explain kind of what you mean by that?
So I think we spent the whole hearing having a very, very intense debate about what's, is this a rebellion? Is this dangerous? Is this violence? And then, we're talking about there's a federal ICE facility shut for a month. And then here's City of Portland saying, oh, well, you need to unboard the windows because it's a zoning violation. And I think given the level of sort of rebellion and intrigue, that it's a little bit of a mismatch.
It felt like a mess, yeah. Laura Appleman, thank you so much for being here, Kyle,
Thank you for
as
having
well.
me.
Of course, our team at KGW will continue to follow this throughout the afternoon as you've been watching a special report here on KGW Plus. We're recapping the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals considering a temporary restraining order blocking the Trump administration from deploying troops in Oregon. This is a developing story. We will bring you the very latest throughout the afternoon on any news that breaks in this decision, and we will see you back here for the news at noon. Thanks for watching.